Hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome to Stellar Talks.
Hello to all.
So, who are here this evening? Tonight, not evening anymore.
Well, not for us.
Yeah. So we have 11 people
13
for the moment.
Yeah.
How is everyone? How is the weather in your cities? It's snowing in Ankara like hell since
It's
last night.
raining here in Izmir. It's raining right now, and it's so cold. Like I think it's the cold of the snow that you
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
having in Ankara. But we don't have the snow, unfortunately.
Yeah, we had it today for like 15 or 20 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, and then it just stopped. It's freezing cold at the moment here.
Yeah, and tomorrow's gonna be colder, I think.
Yeah, I believe so.
So who else is here? Carl Pereira says hello.
Hello, good evening, Carl.
Hi, Carl.
No rain in Çeşme, he says.
No, it's raining right now in Alaçatı,
Yeah.
Carl.
Yeah. Nico says,
yeah,
nice and warm here in Boston.
Nice and warm here in Boston,
Yeah, I can see some sunlight coming from the window on your left-hand side, Nico. Anyway, so I think let's start. Shall we start? Is the sound okay and everything is okay? Let's ask the viewers.
Yeah. Would you guys please check if the sound is okay? Like there is no echo or anything.
Yeah. So Ivan says, "Hey everyone, hi Ivan."
Hello.
Yeah. Okay, so I think let's start.
Right, let's roll the intro then.
Hello. Hi, Nico. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Welcome, Nico.
Yeah, so we have the famous nebulaphotos.com tonight, Nico Carver, with us. He's been my friend in our Instagram group. The name is ever changing, but I don't remember the last name. It's AP Weather Complaints or something, Nico. Yeah.
Right,
so
yeah.
it was astrophotography Jedi Council before. But yeah, Nico is one of our friends, and he has some really good stuff going on in YouTube. Yeah. So how are you, Nico?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Mustafa, and everyone. I've been watching your live streams with Ross and have there been any? Oh, and the I can't remember his name, but the Aurora last week was so good.
Esa, yeah.
Yeah.
Esa, Finland.
Yeah. So how is everything?
Good. Yeah, I've been busy with both YouTube and testing the new QHY camera that came in, and yeah, it's really fun. Looking also, it's start of Milky Way season here, so just the other weekend I got out and saw the first Milky Way core rising around 3 a.m. local time. That was always a treat, the start of Milky Way season.
Yeah, that is a good treat. We cannot do that because here in Turkey we have a lockdown between 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. every night, and it's been like this for like 5-6 months now, and we are all, like our hands are shaking like addicted people.
And we are we are looking forward to taking new photos of the Milky Way because I mean, I myself, I'm running out of photos to edit. So
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I can sell you some.
Do you have some? I might have some too.
Yeah. Yeah.
black markets.
So we know that you're in Massachusetts, in United States. Can you introduce us a little bit, Nico?
Sure. Yeah. So I got into astrophotography now about 6 years ago. And actually, if you want to bring up the PowerPoint, I can show an image.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sure. Just a second.
This slide 2. I got in about 6 years ago on a trip to Iceland and to see the aurora, because I had previously seen them a little bit in Alaska, but it just was sort of like a teaser because it was September, so they weren't super strong.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to see like them dance more quickly, and the strong green color you can even perceive with your eye a little bit. And so I went to Iceland in December of 2014. And I was lucky enough to see them on 2 different nights. I rented my own truck to drive around so that I could just sort of be mobile and try to find them.
Yeah.
And that was really worth doing. This was at a famous location in Iceland called the Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon, which is on the coast. And there were photographers there from all the different countries. Like I met some from Japan, from Russia, from China, and it was just amazing to be out there at night with all these people dedicated to it.
Yeah.
And that's
United Nations of Astrophotography.
Exactly, yeah, because they all knew this is a good location because you get that amazing reflection on the water. And at the time, I was into time-lapse photography, so I was doing many exposures in a row to sequence into a video. And it was only months later that I took a picture out of that sequence and brightened it up and saw that, whoa, there's so much more here. There's all these pinks and reds and all this really cool stuff. And so that's what hooked me, I think. And so that was now 6 years ago. And then it took me about 2 years to realize that I could do more than just wide field stuff. And that's when I got into deep sky in 2016. But in the meantime, in between 2014 and 2016, that's when I first started doing Milky Way too. So if you go to the next slide, I went to Death Valley, and that was still the darkest sky I've ever seen. Death Valley National Park in the U.S. is
it like Portal 1 or something?
Portal 1, yeah. And it was so dark that I feel that I could see the Lagoon Nebula with my naked eye. It was so dark.
Yeah. Yeah, I have heard people saying, I mean, as a joke, that they have seen North American nebula, but I would believe that you could see it. The Lagoon Nebula by naked eye. I would believe that.
Yeah, I mean, and I was still pretty inexperienced in astrophotography. So if you look closely at this picture, you'll see that it's actually sort of soft. It's a little bit out of focus, but when you get to a location that good, it's just amazing what you get.
It's mind blowing. Yeah.
And so at this time, I was still just doing basically mostly single exposure stuff, sort of treating it like landscape photography. But then, I just got more and more interested and started reading books and just book after book, because I'm a librarian, so I definitely gravitate towards books. And so I read like any book on astrophotography that I could find. And
do you have some books in your library?
Oh yeah, I have
astrophotography books. No, not in your home. I mean, in the library that you are working.
Oh yes, yeah. Actually, I should mention that. This is all in part of the introduction. I'm an astronomy librarian, and I work at probably the biggest library full of astronomy books in the world. It's at the Center for Astrophysics. Okay,
give me the address, Nico.
Yeah. Well, if you visit sometime, I could show you. It's amazing what we have. We also have special collections like very old books with like Charles Messier's original notes in the books
Oh
and
my
things.
God.
So just amazing things there.
Wow.
And I got that job eventually sort of through astrophotography, because before I discovered astrophotography, I didn't know anything about astronomy. And so I was already a librarian, but it was really astrophotography that opened up my eyes to, I really love the night sky. And so I just sort of melded my two passions, and that's why I'm now an astronomy librarian.
Oh, that's a very interesting story. And very rare story also. Yeah. So then you what did you buy in the first place?
Oh yeah, so I had already had some fast lenses. I actually had a lot of Rokinon lenses, or they're called Samyang lenses in other countries.
Yeah.
And those are very popular. Not only, I mean, astrophotographers know them because they're budget lenses that are very fast, but they're also very popular for filmmakers because they're budget fast lenses. So I already had a lot of those. And so I already had, Canon cameras, the Rokinon lenses, and that's how I did these first couple shots.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I bought a AstroTrack, which I don't know how many people will know that tracker. It's pretty uncommon these days. It's British made, and it's sort of it's unusual. It's all metal construction. It holds like 30 pounds, but it's sort of impractical too, because it's a different kind of design. It rotates this long rod, and then once you reach the end of the rod, you have to roll, and then that's going to throw off your alignment. So modern day trackers like the Star Adventurer, that was called Star Adventurer, I think are better because they will just keep tracking, and you never have to rewind it. You can keep tracking the whole night, and that's so nice compared to the AstroTrack. So yeah, that's how I started, was AstroTrack. After these Milky Way shots, I started with the AstroTrack for tracked photography, and that's how I first shot like the Orion Nebula from my backyard, Bortle 8. But I could, the Orion Nebula is so bright that almost anyone who starts with that one, they're going to see something when they take a photo of it, if they at least get it on the chip. And so I was just amazed that I could see all these colors in the nebula, like the green in the core, and then it goes out into the pinks and the magentas and all of that stuff. And that was another moment where I was really like, this is so cool. I can't stop wanting to take pictures, because when you see those colors of the night sky, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
So after that, I just got more and more into stuff, telescopes and all of that. Probably a similar sort of path that other people take, like the 80 millimeter refractor and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, I started the YouTube channel because I already had this filmmaking background, and so I thought it would be good just to share my experience and my thoughts on different things related to astrophotography. And it started with just fairly random videos. I didn't have any clear direction, but then over time, I've been getting more and more into beginner topics for people that aren't on a budget, because it just seems like a lot of people are asking me for those kinds of videos. And so that's one thing I've become known for, is the topic that we'll talk today about, which is sort of, if you're just starting out, can you start with just a tripod, a DSLR? And the answer is definitely yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so like you said, today's topic is untracked astrophotography. Actually, this includes the photographs like this one, and also you can take some deep sky objects without a sky tracker. So that is actually where I also started. I mean, I was taking landscape Milky Way photos, but then I was like, okay, I need to take some nebula or galaxies and stuff like that. So my first was Andromeda galaxy, of course. Of course, because it's everybody's target. So I can never forget that moment when I stacked all the data. It was like few hundred, like 600 images, because it was on track, obviously. So it was made of 3 seconds and 1.6 seconds sub frames. So I cannot forget the moment that I saw some structure, even with that total amount of integration. So that hooked me up. I was like, okay, I should go on.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, for people that are coming to this from tracked astrophotography, if you take a 10-minute sub, you're going to see lots of structure in there.
Yeah.
And the same can be said for a 10-minute integration of very short subs. You'll see lots of structure. So it's 10 minutes total is sort of 10 minutes total. Even though with the untracked, you're going to deal with a bit more noise. But it's not a huge difference. It's minor if you're looking at the same total integration.
Yeah. So let's start a little. Actually, I have 2 questions, and first question is, why do we need the track? Then second question, why we don't want the track? Because we are going to talk about untracked astrophotography. So
Sure.
We actually want to track the stars, and there is a reason for that. And we also don't want to do it. There's also a reason for that.
Yes. So I think the first question is, why do we not want to track? Because tracking is complicated. You have to polar align, you have to understand balance, you have to make sure that it all works correctly. And I've seen many, many people, including me, the first time you try it, it's just like,
giving up at that moment.
I give up. This is so hard. I don't get what's wrong. Yeah. And you see a problem, but you don't know how to fix it because you're a beginner. And so I think that untracked, it's an easier way to start, because I think it's just, if just do a very short exposure, 1 second, you get round stars, and then you're off to the races. With tracking, it's sort of like, I don't know what the problem is here because I'm too inexperienced. And so I think one reason not to track is just, it's much easier for the beginner to get the concepts.
Yeah.
I think another reason not to track is
budget, of course.
Budget, yeah. You don't have to buy a tracker, and you might already have a camera that can shoot RAW. One thing I've people ask me a lot, and it's something I haven't done yet, but people say, well, why do you always say the DSLR or the lens? And it's really because when you're doing untracked, you want fast optics. And the problem often with
telescopes
is they're slow. And so it's just, even if they shoot RAW, the optics are pretty slow.
And also there's something else there. With the lens, your focal length is limited. Mm-hmm. And I will come to that point, because you have to limit your focal length for untracked astrophotography. You cannot do untracked astrophotography with 2000 millimeter focal length, right?
Yes.
So that is stopping you doing that. So there's also this, they are fast, and focal lengths are shorter. And this also, the length of focal length and also the size of your sensor determines the maximum time that you can make your shot. And, according to, let's say, 500 rule, it stops you doing longer exposures.
Right. I think one thing that, I think it's a really good point. So when you're stacking, the stacking software expects round stars. If you have very trailed stars, the stacking software won't know that those are stars and can't put them all together. It can't align your pictures. Yeah. And so this is the one thing I really want to emphasize to people is the reason we have to do such short exposures and really make sure that our stars are round is otherwise the whole process of untracked photography, the reason that it works is because we can stack so many together. And the only reason we can stack is because we can set the software to align based on the star patterns. And the software has to recognize those as stars, which means we're limited to very short exposures.
Yeah.
And like you said, at 2,000 millimeters focal length, like a telescope focal length, like if you're using a Schmidt-Cassegrain, untracked becomes pretty impractical because you're talking about such short exposures to get round stars that you're not going to have enough signal. The nebula will be too dim. There won't be enough photons hitting the camera sensor in that time.
Yeah. Moreover, that telescope will be way slower than the lens.
Yeah, it'll be like an F10 or maybe an F7, and so it's much slower than a lens. Yep.
Yeah. So did we cover these questions? Why do we?
So another reason, maybe, I think you said why not to track, and then why would we track? And so why would we track? The longer you can expose for in each exposure, the more you're swamping the noise from the camera. And this is very important when you want to have a picture of a dim object. And many, many nebulae, like very famous ones, like the Heart and Soul and the California Nebula, are super dim. They're compared to something like Andromeda Core or Orion, they're much, much, much dimmer. And so to do those successfully, you really sort of need the tracker, because you just need to get off that noise floor of the camera. And so I think the other thing to emphasize with untracked astrophotography is it's not going to work for every deep sky object. It works for some. It works for brighter ones much better than dimmer ones.
Yeah, so we have to understand, actually, there is one noise bad. It happens no matter what. And there are different resources of noise, like there is shot noise, there is dark current noise, there's bias noise, and lots of different resources of noise. So it is there. And by your longer exposures, you have to overcome that noise, and you have to overcome and you have to go above that noise so that the object you are shooting should be visible, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, otherwise it just gets lost in the noise. It'll basically just look like a bunch of random grain in your picture. And so it needs to get at least a little bit above that noise bed, like you said.
Yeah. Okay, so what are the main equipments that we need for this? Actually, we already told, but maybe we can go into deeper.
Sure. So so let me start with, you need some kind of camera, and ideally, but really recommended, that camera should shoot RAW. And what I mean by that is there's some cameras that shoot JPEG only. You don't want that. You want to shoot in RAW format. And one of the reasons for that is then you can also calibrate your images with these things called calibration frames, darks, biases, and flats. And calibration, really, you need the raw frames for the calibration to work correctly. It doesn't work very well on JPEGs because those are already processed in the camera. So that's the number one thing, is a camera that can shoot RAW. Number two is a lens. And we talked about, when we say fast, what that means is the focal ratio. So the focal ratio is the aperture in relation to the focal length. And so how big the width of the lens is compared to how long the lens is. And so that ratio determines how much light is falling on the sensor over a given time. And a faster lens will have sort of a wider, will usually be heavier because the glass element has to be wider. And so when we say a fast lens, I usually mean something like f/4 or faster. So f/4 or f/2.8, f/2. And then with the really fast lenses out today, you can even get down to f/1.0.
There's even 0.9.
Yeah, or 0.9. Yeah. So these are very fast lenses. Of course, this comes with some trade-offs. Usually when you get into those really, really fast lenses, your stars will be a little bit more misshapen. But there, and to get to get sort of the ultimate lens, you want a fast lens where the stars stay very round. But those lenses get very expensive. So anyways, the main thing is, if you are picking out a new lens to go with your camera, if you can get one that says f2 or f2.8, that's going to be much better than the one that says f5.6 for doing untracked astrophotography.
Yeah, you cannot do it. As most of the people watching us know, we actually have three variables in photography, not in astrophotography. The exposure time, and here in this untracked astrophotography, the exposure time should be very short. So, and then there is the ISO, which is also a problem because in digital photography, ISO is not a real variable. And the last one is the aperture of your lens. So you have to have a really nice wide open lens and fast lens to overcome the light that you were losing by shortest exposures.
Exactly.
So it is very important, actually. You know, when we are talking about astrophotography, if you're tracking, you can stop down with your lens to, let's say, overcome some problems, comas or whatever. But in untracked astrophotography, you shouldn't stop down because you need that light.
Yes, and I think one of the trade-offs with untracked astrophotography is because you're not stopping down, you might have to deal with more things in post-processing. So for instance, with a lot of lenses, if you stop down, you then will not have as much chromatic aberration, which is basically this magenta ring around your stars. And so if you shoot wide open, that magenta ring is a lot more noticeable. Yeah. And then you just have to deal with it in Photoshop or something like that. So there's definitely trade-offs, but most of them can be overcome, and you can still get a very nice photograph.
Yeah.
Okay, so equipment, we did camera, lens, and then the last one is a tripod. And the most important part of the tripod is the head, because if you get one with a really cheap head, it will droop with the weight of your camera, and then you'll get trails. The stars won't be round. Yeah. So you need one that has a very sturdy ball head or some other kind of pan tilt tripod head on the top.
Yeah, and also what we always recommend people to buy, a better tripod because within time, in years, they may change their cameras, their lenses, and everything, but they can go on with the same tripod, because if you buy a good one, it will take years. If you don't lose it or if you don't break it, you can use it for many years, for decades, actually.
Yeah, I use an Italian brand called Manfrotto, and I've had them for 20 years, actually. Since I was a teenager, so they last, and you can repair them.
Yeah, they last so long.
And the one other thing I'd say with the tripod buying advice is, do not get one where the head is not removable. So only get tripods where you can remove the head, because later on you may want to get a star tracker, and to use your tripod, you'll have to remove the head so you can put the tracker on as sort of like the new tripod head, and then you can put your ball head on top of the tracker. So just make sure that when you buy your tripod that you can remove that tripod head.
Yeah. So these three are actually the main equipments that we need. DSLR or mirrorless camera, but which can take raw photos, fast lens, and the tripod.
I'll
But we
mention two accessories that I think are good. One is make sure some cameras today have a built-in what's called an intervalometer or interval timer. Others don't. So you'll have to look at your camera to know if you need to buy an external one. Yeah. And that basically just makes it so much easier to program in sequence of exposures. You can say take 50 and it will just go and take 50 exposures very quickly.
Yeah.
The other is some kind of focusing aid. And so with telephoto lenses, at least, I find Badenov mask is very useful. Yeah. With the wide angle lenses, not so much because it's just very hard to see the pattern. But 200 millimeters or something like that, a Badenov mask is very useful for focusing on the stars.
Yeah. So going back to lenses, of course, we should look for a fast lens. Like you said, the number is smaller. The number is the lens is faster. But like I said before, we should limit the focal length to a certain point. What do you think about that focal length should be? I mean, what would you say not to go over the focal length?
So my thinking on this has changed. When I first started doing this, I didn't think that it was practical to go over 85 millimeters. But then I started doing these things with 200, and I was really surprised by how good the pictures could be at 200 millimeters untracked. So now I don't know, Mustafa. And maybe 300 millimeters is fine, or 400. I don't know. I've seen people send me things at 400 millimeters untracked that I'm amazed by. So
one question actually. Then I will let guys ask some questions, and there are also questions in the chat. This is a very important question, Nico. So let's say you took 3 seconds, 10 sub frames. So it is 30 seconds in total. Or you took 2 15 seconds and total 30 seconds. Is there a difference between those?
Yes.
Which one is better?
I tested that difference in a video called Tracker versus No Tracker, where I tested 1 second subs versus 30-second subs. But with your example too, 3 seconds versus 15 seconds, you will see a difference in the final picture. And the one with longer subs will go deeper and have less noise. Yeah. And the reason for that is when you're doing 1 second or 3 second subs, part of your picture is above what you called the noise bed earlier, but part is not. Part of your signal is down in the noise.
Yeah, because the signal is changing in the different parts of the picture.
Exactly.
And especially in the dim parts. Like I did this test on Pleiades, and Pleiades has some filaments that are very bright, but then other parts that are very, very dim. And in the dim parts, in the 1 second exposures, it's just completely noisy. But in the 30-second exposures, you can see more detail and real detail.
And of course, there is the importance of stacking also comes here. But we will talk about that later. So maybe we can, I can let OKAN and John talk a little, and I can chat.
By the way, we have some questions from the viewers. Like, let me just read so we catch up.
Yeah.
Astro Carpets. Hey guys, I've recently bought an Edge HD 925 and I'm going to shoot at f10 because I can't find the reducer in stock. So he's asking if you have any tips shooting at f10 with the 294 MC Pro. It's me, Aaron, by the way.
We know Aaron. Aaron is also in our group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does Aaron say what mount he's using, or?
He not actually.
He has, I think he has EQ6.
EQ6R, yeah, he was mentioned it.
I think he has
EQ6R, yeah.
EQ6.
So, I think that you might, you're probably going to be limited at first to short exposures, even with the EQ6R, until you add auto guiding at that focal length. And probably at that focal length, I would recommend getting an off-axis guider.
Yeah.
And so what an off-axis guider is it has a little pick-off mirror that directs the light so that your guide camera is like off to the side. And the reason you use those at long focal lengths is you don't have to then deal with what's called flexure of the guide scope. And so that's what I'd recommend is after you've experimented a little bit with short exposures, look into auto guiding.
Yeah.
Nice. And Prutu Vanara says, I take 1 second untracked with 300 millimeter lens. And then any other
Carl also has
Let's
one.
see.
I guess he asked how long exposures are people taking. I believe he's asking for general. Doesn't matter with the tracker or not.
So I use two different rules. For untracked, I use this rule by this French guy named Michaud who developed this thing called the NPF rule.
Mm-hmm.
It's now been put into an app called PhotoPills. So it's very easy to find this rule. Yeah. And it just makes it so that you're going to get sharp stars with that rule. So you just plug in things into a calculator and it will tell you the exposure time. For tracked astrophotography on a DSLR, I do the histogram. I look at the histogram, and you basically just want your histogram peak or mountain to be about a third over or a quarter over, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's the aim.
Yeah. So Pruto says manual focus. So we are looking for, if we are going to use that lens, I mean, going back to the equipment part, if you are going to use that lens only for this reason, of course, we don't need to buy an autofocus lens because we will never use, or the lens shouldn't, it doesn't matter if it has a vibration reduction or not because we will never use it.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Yeah.
And Batuhan says Canon 70-200.
Sorry?
Pauline has a good question actually. How often would you recenter the object untracked?
Oh.
That is a good question. Yeah. It's one I get a lot and I really should try to develop a better answer for. Because I usually just
depends on the focal length.
It depends entirely on the focal length, but I feel like there should be some way to sort of calculate it. But I just do it trial and error, so I sort of like am looking at the pictures every so often, and then I develop a sort of a timing. So it's like, okay, after 20 or 30 pictures, it's drifted this much, like, and so then I want to recenter. And the more often you recenter, the better your results will be, because the less you recenter, the more you're going to have to crop away the edges.
Yeah.
And if you only recenter every 100 or 200 shots, you're going to have to crop a lot.
Yeah,
so, because it also depends on your target, because if you're shooting a small, let's say, galaxy, then maybe you can recenter every 20, because then, you know, it will let you crop more. But if you're shooting, let's say, North American nebula and Pelican nebula with, let's say, 200 millimeter on a crop body, so it will fill your frame. So maybe it's even better if you recenter it every 5 images. So it depends on your camera and on the target also.
And one and this is also one advantage to bigger sensors is with full frame, I will recenter less often and don't really worry about it. I know I'll just crop more.
And also the exposure time will be longer than the crop sensor.
Right.
And also you will have a little bit of an ISO advantage as well.
Yeah.
Nice. And let's see if we have any other questions.
Yeah, there was questions actually beforehand. You were reading from Batuhan Dereli.
Yeah. Batuhan says
it is not a question actually.
But that's not a question. No. So Pruto has a question, Vanara. How many should I shoot to get some good details of the Orion Nebula at 300 millimeters with f5.6 untracked
Hmm.
of the
It
Orion?
depends on a lot of factors. One is how much light pollution you're dealing with. So, for instance, if you were at a very, very dark sky, maybe after a few hundred pictures, it would look great. But if you were under a city sky, even 3,000 pictures, and it still looks sort of...
No.
So
Noisy.
it really depends a lot on how dark your sky is. But I really always, the more, the better.
Exactly.
As long as everything you're getting is in focus and you can shoot all night, you might as well. That's sort of my thinking. Just shoot until your battery dies or your SD card is full.
So the more...
Yeah, so it's Bortle class 4.
The more data you collect, the better.
So another thing I should say, you said if f5.6, if you were saying Bortle 9, I would say sort of forget about it, but Bortle 4 f5.6, you'll get some detail on Orion Nebula, at least in the brighter parts. So a lot depends on how dark the sky is, and if the sky is a lot darker, you can get away with not quite as fast lenses. Of course, faster lenses will always give you more detail, but I think you should try, because I think you'll get something at least. But in terms of how many, I'd always just say just keep shooting.
Yeah, more is better always.
Till you are bored.
Yeah.
Or till you are cold, or till you are hungry, whatever. Yeah. So there's another question from Pauline. What is the best way to locate an object without a go-to? That's also a good one.
Very good. So some objects are easier than others. Like Orion is, easy to spot because that constellation is so bright. Another easy one to spot is things that are in the Milky Way. Often are pretty easy. Like Rho Ophiuchi, which I shot the other night, is very easy because it's right in Scorpius, and there's a bright star called Antares right there, and so it's very easy just to center your camera. So those are good beginner objects because they're easy to find too. Other ones are much harder, and what you have to do is get good at something called star hopping, which is you look at the patterns of the stars in the sky, and then you look at a reference for like a book or an app for where the object should be, and you move your camera from bright star to bright star till you find it. Once you're getting close, there's a couple things I recommend. One is take test exposures at very high ISO. And in a test exposure, you might be able to see the object if it's fairly bright, like Andromeda or something like that. Then once you found it, you can turn your ISO back down a little bit.
Even you can see it on your live view, actually. If the object is too bright.
And if you have...
Depending on your camera also.
Exactly.
And another thing is if you're using a zoom lens, which we don't necessarily recommend, but if you are using a zoom lens, zoom out when you're finding the object, and then you'll see more star patterns in live view and everything. And then once you think you're on it, then you zoom in. Because when you're zoomed in at, like, let's say 300 millimeters, it's much harder to find things because all the stars look the same.
They can use the grid in the camera, actually. For instance, let's say you're looking for Andromeda galaxy. Like you said, let's say you have 70 to 200 millimeters. Put it on 70 millimeter. Find Andromeda galaxy, and using the grids, put the Andromeda right in the center, and then zoom in again. But of course, you have to be quick because Andromeda will move.
All right, so Görkem has a good question as well. What is the advantage of ISO invariance cameras against others?
ISO invariance cameras, you can basically pick, if they're truly ISO invariant, you could just pick any ISO, and there's no advantage noise-wise to using one ISO versus another. ISO variant cameras, there's an ideal ISO, meaning usually it levels off at some point at like 800 or 1600 is common on Canon cameras, and that's really the only ISO you should use in terms of noise, because it's where the noise is leveling off, and anything lower ISO like 400, 200, 100 are going to have way more noise. That's how I think of it.
And one more thing to add, actually, if you have an ISO variant camera, let's say you took a photo and it was underexposed, so you have to overexpose it in the post. You need to correct it on the post-production, and once you do that, you gain more noise than you would take it with a higher ISO. So it has an advantage on that manner as well.
Oh, and I should say the ISO variant cameras are usually the Sony and the newer Nikons that have Sony sensors.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, so let's take some more questions and then let's continue. Batuhan says, my question, should I use lens hood when I take photo, also during the flat frame taking?
Yes, I think so. I always use a lens hood because if there's any stray local light sources, very easy for those to get into your shot if you're not using a hood. Also, the hood will be some protection against dew. And so there's
like a dew shield.
Yeah, it's like a dew shield. So I think I always use it. Yeah. The only thing with flats is if you're trying to use a pedal-shaped lens hood and then you try to do flats, those never come out right for me. If you're using a panel for flats, I think if you have the pedal-shaped lens hood, you have to shoot sky flats, basically.
Yeah, because there will be some other light coming out of the place. Yeah. If there are other light
sources around.
Aran again asks, I have a lot of noise even with a cool camera and 5 hours of data. The noise is unbelievably horrible. Any tips?
It's probably light pollution is my guess. Shooting narrowband if you can afford it. I don't know what else to.
I would also recommend that, and maybe his subs are underexposed because when there is no signal, there is noise. So that might be the reason also. So Tucha says, after so many weeks, I still can't get used to the fast lens. She's an astronomer. She's a doctor in astronomy actually, but they don't call lenses and telescopes fast or slow like we do. So Aran says Bortle 8 and I use L Pro and L Enhance. So it's actually narrow band. But maybe your subs are short because L Enhance and sorry.
I was gonna say with shooting narrowband with a color camera, I sort of missed that part of it. It's tricky. You will get a lot of noise. You have to just accept that you're probably gonna have to do very long integration. So maybe 5 hours is just not nearly enough.
Well, I can tell Nico, I have a few photos, if you remember, that I took with STC Duo narrowband camera and Nikon DSLR. The total integration is nearly 24 hours, and there's still noise. So you can get away, the noise with DSLR and narrowband filters.
And also in light pollution.
So get used to it, Aran. Maybe you can increase your noise reduction techniques. You can develop your noise reduction techniques.
Okay, Nubs29 is asking, I'm thinking of buying a Canon 60D for astrophotography. I've heard it's decent for astrophotography. Is that true?
Yeah, I have. I've had a couple, and I still own a full spectrum one. It's good.
Nice. Carl says get it astro modded, and he says I have Canon 600D modded.
Cool.
And then
please read.
Emre
John.
says you're using Creative Commons license for your photos and sharing them freely with people. This is amazing. How did you decide opening them up to public, and how do you sustain your photography?
So I think that's directed at me. I do use Creative Commons licenses for all my astrophotography. What that means is that instead of retaining the copyright, I say other people can use my photos as long as they give me credit. If they say Nico Carver took this photo, and I've just always been interested in that. I don't know. To me, I'm not really that interested in selling my astro photos yet. But the other thing to keep in mind is if I decided at some point my astrophotography is good enough to sell, I could just not do the Creative Commons on one picture that I really want to sell, but then on all the other ones, Creative Commons, because I just want to get them out there. So and how do I sustain it? I do make some money from doing YouTube. And then also by doing YouTube, some vendors will reach out and say, do you want to try out this camera, or we can, let you test it, that kind of thing. So that's been nice too.
Yeah. Okay,
Great.
so let's we finish the questions, and Aran says, "Thanks, guys. Best solution is to go to monochrome." Yeah, please. Yeah, it's also my goal. Really, I mean, I'm fed up with DSLR. Really, I really am. Anyway, so we covered the equipment part. If we can summarize, we need a camera that can shoot RAW. We need a fast lens, and we need a tripod, which is nice, and then we need to maybe we can actually increase the number of optional accessories, like people can use laser pointers to locate the object and and then they should of course have a headlamp and stuff like that, and they can use cell phone star ops and stuff like that, and of course it needs some planning to shoot deep sky objects also. So let's talk about that planning part a little, Nico.
Yeah. So maybe we could go back to the PowerPoint just so I could show a couple images while we're talking about planning. Maybe slide 4. So one thing is you have to know when a certain section of the sky or deep sky object will be available for your location. And so there's different apps for this. You can use something like a planetarium app, like Stellarium or things like that. There's also good websites. One that I use is called Telescopius. It's like telescope and then ES. And that you put in your location, and then you can search any object, and it will tell you exactly when it will rise and set, and what season it's good for, and that kind of thing.
So which slide did you say, Nico?
Slide 4.
I think. We can't hear OKAN.
Yep. And then the next thing is framing is part of planning too. So you can actually think about the composition that you want before you go out under the night sky and shoot it. And so you can think, well, what orientation do I want the camera to be in so that I get, for this one, it was so that I get those dust lanes going out like that. And I thought about that before I went out and shot it. And Telescopius is another one where you can put in your gear, and it will simulate for you what the night sky will look like with your lens and camera. And so that's another way to plan your shot.
Stellarium does that also.
Yep, and Stellarium does it too. There's a number of tools. Yep. So then I think that if you have a number of different lenses, you sort of have to, in planning, think about what you want to focus on. So in this shot, I was focusing on the a big section of the Milky Way and how those dust lanes come out from the core area. But if you go to the next slide, I zoom in a little bit, and the focus is more on the nebulae, the Lagoon and Trifid and Omega, and the star cloud there in the middle, which is all these very blue stars. So this is just pushed in a bit. We went from 24 millimeters to 50 millimeters. Both untracked.
So of course you're also planning about the light pollution where you are going and the weather, of course, right?
Yes, exactly. So there's, again, websites, they're free that do this well. Lightpollutionmap.info is a global light pollution map. It's very useful. And there's a number of websites. I don't know which ones work in which countries, but I think clearoutside.com is a one that works all over.
Works.
And it will tell you, it's not perfectly accurate, but it will tell you some idea of when there will be clouds or not.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's another one that I use. It is called Flowix. I will write it down on the chat. So it is more. It looks like more accurate. Comparing to Clear Outside. But Clear Outside has other good stuff because it shows the dew point. It shows if there's going to be a rain or ice or whatever. It shows lots of things. Go out and don't go out. It shows the phase of the moon and stuff like that. So in terms of
one weather condition that's been really irking me lately is wind. Usually wind doesn't bother me here, but this winter has been terrible for wind. And this is usually more of a problem at higher focal lengths because at higher focal lengths, the wind will blur your picture more. When you're very wide angle like this, wind is not usually as big a problem unless it's very, very windy.
So you should also care about those information. Of course, it depends on your local stuff. Light pollution, wind, and other local things in terms of weather and other conditions.
Yeah, and you mentioned dew point. That's another good thing to bring up. Some locations are very humid and dewy, and then your lens can fog up. And that's another accessory you might consider. If you think you live in a location that's very humid, very wet, you might want to get a dew strap or you can get chemical hand warmers and rubber band them to your lens, things like that to prevent dew from forming.
That's also important because then you won't realize while you're shooting, but when you go home and start stacking, you will see fat stars and very not nice looking pictures. And so we bought the equipment, we made the planning. So what will be the shooting settings?
So we talked a little bit through the questions about ISO and but generally I'd say, this is just a very rule of thumb, but for untracked, I would say like ISO 1600 or 3200 is usually pretty good on most cameras. I wouldn't do like ISO 100 usually for untracked. It's just going to be so dim.
Yes. Also, there is one thing, Nico. You should stick to full stops on ISO settings. If you go in between, let's say, if you go to 2500s instead of 3200, then you will that will cause some noise, bias noise, right?
Yeah, I've heard that on a lot of cameras, at least, the in-between ones are digital amplification, while the main stops of ISO are what's the word? Normal voltage. It's just they basically just. So it's yes, I think the in-between ones can add noise on some cameras.
Yeah.
So
it will be like 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, and go.
Okay, and then another question I get a lot about ISO is, well, why not just go to the highest one that the camera can do? And a lot of times with those really high ones, those are also basically just a digital amplification that will add noise. I can't tell you exactly where that starts on every camera, but I can tell you that I typically don't go above 6400. So I don't go into the ISOs above 10,000. I know probably this isn't true on every camera. Like on some of the new Sony cameras, I think you can go really high, but on Canons I wouldn't.
Yeah.
For
Nikons also, I wouldn't.
With the Sony, like I think I've gone till 12,800 ISO, and when I stacked it, it was quite good. I mean,
well, actually, as far as I know, Nico, when you buy a DSLR camera or mirrorless camera, there is normal ISO and there's extended ISO. Extended ISO is actually amplifying digitally. When the charge is read from your sensor, it goes to ADC, analog to digital converter. If you're amplifying this before ADC, then it is normal ISO. If you are amplifying this after ADC, it is digital ISO. Digital extended ISO, actually, and you shouldn't go that far with astrophotography, at least.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And then the other settings, the exposure time, I suggest MPF rule if you're going to be stacking. If you're not stacking and just taking a single exposure, then probably rule of 500 or 400 or something is fine. But if you're stacking and you want really round stars, then the more accurate MPF rule, which is more conservative usually than the rule of 500, I would recommend that. And then F ratio, like we said earlier, I would just go wide open. I know some people say stop down even for untracked, but I almost always shoot wide open. So what wide open means is pick the smallest number. So if the smallest number is 2, use 2. If it's f1.8, use that.
Yeah, and there are some really good lenses which are really good even open wide. Let's say Samyang or Rokinon 135. It is perfect at f.2 2.0. So just go with it. Yeah. So the settings. Also, we can talk about white balance.
Yeah. So I usually set my white balance to daylight. If you're on a stock camera, and it will just make the processing a little bit easier usually on you because your pictures will come in a little bit more color balanced. But it's not crucial because you're going to color balance in post processing anyways. And so white balance is not a really big factor, but I usually just set mine to daylight.
Yeah, I always use auto because the white balance data is not written on raw data. Once it is on your computer, you can treat your picture as it has never been auto balanced. It has never been color balanced in your camera. So yeah. Okay, so we covered.
I wanted to say, turn off auto rotate pictures because I've seen people have trouble with this with calibration frames. Basically, what can happen is if you're using something like Deep Sky Stacker and your camera has rotated, all of a sudden it says this is an incompatible geometry because it it doesn't understand that the vertical versus horizontal. So if you go into your menu and find auto rotate and turn that off, one more setting.
Yeah, if you didn't do that, then before you stack, you should go all your pictures and make the rotation to make the same. If it is portrait, every picture, every subframe should be portrait or landscape, whatever. Yeah. So let's come to calibration frames, Nico.
Yeah. So some people will skip these. I always tell beginners, even who are just starting out, to try them, because they're not that hard, and they will, I think, usually help. They can harm your image if you do them incorrectly. And so I have seen that. I'm not going to lie and say I've never seen someone mess up their image by taking these wrong, because it does happen. But the one that is probably most guilty of messing people up are the flat frames, because I've seen a lot of people either overexpose or underexpose these. And the trick is you want them normally exposed according to your camera. So if you have a meter, you just take your flats so that the meter is reading 0 EV. Or if you look at the histogram, you want the histogram peak to be at around 50%.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. Yeah. So that's how you want your flat frames. You don't want them the same exposure length as your lights. They're going to be much, much shorter usually. Like if your lights are 2 seconds, your flat frames may be 1/40th of a second or something like that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't skip any of them. I would do all of them. Bias frames just means cover your lens, take the photos in the dark, shoot the shutter speed as short as possible. Dark frames are the same settings as your light frames, your pictures of the night sky, except with the lens cap on. And the important thing with dark frames is to try to take them at the same temperature as your light frames. So the easiest way to do that is just that night when you're out there, after you've taken your pictures of the night sky, then set a sequence for your dark frames.
You can even actually take dark frames in between the light frames, because just to keep the sensor temperature the same with your light frames.
And then flat frames I already sort of mentioned, but it's just a picture of a very white, evenly illuminated surface. So the easiest way to do this is use a screen on top of your lens. At least that's the easiest way to do it at night. Another way to do it is just take a picture of the daytime sky. But usually the issue sometimes with flat frames is that, for instance, if you just take a picture of the daytime sky, it's going to be so quick in exposure before it's completely blown out that sometimes it just introduces issues that way. So you might have to work in diffusion using like t-shirts or white paper, things like that.
Okay.
And you should make sure that there's nothing in the sky, like clouds or stars or something like that.
I've always struggled with sky flats. So one thing is that you try to take them, during the dawn, but then the dawn is always changing. It's like you get the gradients from the sunrise or whatever. And so I've always struggled with sky flats, and usually do tablet kind of flats where you use an iPad or
any kind of monitor screen.
Or if you have budget, that there are some
flat
things
boxes
that you can buy. Flat boxes that you can buy.
Okay, we have a question from Barry. Can your camera get flat frames wrong if you shoot them in aperture priority mode?
It shouldn't. That should work. But I usually just use manual mode, so I know that they're all exactly the same. Aperture priority mode may meter differently and give you slightly different flats. I don't think it's actually going to be a big issue, but I just usually do them manually.
Yeah, just in case.
To be safe, manual.
Exactly.
Yeah, like you said, especially the flats, if you don't do them right, then it will cause lots of problems. So if you see some stuff that shouldn't be there in terms of, gradients and stuff like that in your picture, then you can try stacking them without flats. Most of the time it helps,
Yeah.
like you can do some trick in the post-processing to reduce the gradients in the background. And it is better than using wrong flats.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we kind of covered everything before processing part, I like to ask, how do you prepare your image for the processing? Like before stacking, after stacking, like what kind of applications do you do on your photos?
Before stacking, I don't really do anything. I just take out the SD card and put it into the computer and organize them. So sometimes I'll use Adobe Bridge, which comes with Photoshop, I think, for looking at the photos, and then you can sort of see, okay, these are all the bias frames, and then you can put them into folders. Then I usually I've used all the different kinds of software. I don't really have a favorite, but there's Deep Sky Stacker can do it well, which is free, but it's Windows only. If you're looking for a free Mac program for stacking and all of this, Siril, S-I-R-I-L is good. And then there are paid programs, of course, and some of them are very popular. The most popular one, I think, is PixInsight. There's also AstroPixel Processor. A new one is Affinity Photo. So I like to try all the softwares to see how they work and if I can get a better result in one versus another. For my personal stuff now, I use PixInsight for the stacking because it's very flexible if you're doing many nights of data, while the other programs are not as well set up for doing, many, many, many hours over multiple sessions as PixInsight is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree on that. In PixInsight, do you use the batch processing or you did manually?
I usually do it. It depends on the project. Actually, with most of my DSLR stuff, I use the batch pre-processing, and for the dedicated Astro cameras, I use manual. I don't know why. I guess it's just that's the way I've gotten used to doing it.
Yeah, everybody has their way. I always do the manual stacking. I don't know why, but I never liked the batch pre-processing stuff. Really, I couldn't do it. Anyways,
well, habits.
Yeah. So we took our objects, we organized them by putting in different folders. Of course, you can go through and look at if there is any trailing or if there is any clouds or any resource of something bad that you can take off your from your subframes. Then stacking and processing.
Well, yeah, but you can, I guess.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, you go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say processing. So there's sort of what we call pre-processing, which is the thing you would do in Deep Sky Stacker, and that only gets you basically a sort of dark, uninteresting here. Then all of the fun part comes in processing, which you can do in Photoshop or GIMP or other different programs, and that's where you can add color and you stretch the image to make it more dynamic and all of these kinds of things. Probably the most well-known is Photoshop because it's a very well-established program, but there's lots of different ones you can try.
Yeah, but with Photoshop, I think there is need for some certain action sets. Actually, with a naked Photoshop, it's really a little bit hard to post-process, right?
A lot of people do find it hard. I guess I'm such an old-time Photoshop user. I don't find it difficult, but I think that it's a huge program. Yeah. So that's the thing is I think a lot of people think, oh, Photoshop is easy and PixInsight is hard, but no, not really. Photoshop can be very hard and learn how to use it.
Of course, yeah.
Interfaces are different, but they are both complex and detailed software. So, and their way of handling is different from each other, but depends. Yeah.
So, well, it's not easy to explain the post-processing, but for a basic workflow, what would you recommend, Nico, for people who are watching us?
So one thing that I think surprises people maybe is that it's usually post-processing astrophotography, you can't really do it well in like one big step. Often you have to take it very incrementally. So everything incrementally, like you stretch some and then you color balance and then you stretch more and you color balance again. And as soon as you make one change to your astrophoto, then you see something else changes that you then have to fix. So it's a very sort of seesaw kind of processing where you do one thing and then you have to do something else and you have to use a mask or but I would say that mostly I'm just using if I'm processing in Photoshop, just things like curves and masks and layers and things like that.
Yeah, like you said, in astrophotography processing, everything should be little by little. You know, it's not like bam once. It's like tick 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 tick. You know, small hits. Yeah.
Another thing I'd say with processing is you might be very sort of wrapped up into what you're doing, and then you don't realize that you've gone way too far. And so I always sort of look away and then maybe go take a coffee break and then come back and look at what you've done, because sometimes it will just look very extreme and you just haven't noticed because your brain keeps adapting to the next change. So it's helpful to be able to undo and go back in time and start again.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, definitely. And while I'm actually in PixInsight, you can save it as a project. But what I do is, for instance, let's say I started and I made dynamic background extraction. I save it, and then I do the background notarization. I save it with different name. Then I do the color calibration. I save it again. So when I want to go back to color calibrated frame, then I have the file there. So that's also crucial, that you can go back and start from somewhere you like actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one reason I agree with you. It's sometimes easier for me to do it that way, of just saving off different copies, because the PixInsight projects can get so huge,
overwhelming.
It's not worth it.
You can get lost. You can have lots of modules, and you can have lots of masks open. Then you can get lost easily. Yeah.
So before we move on to the next step of us untracked astrophotography, here's a question from Barry again. How many calibration frames should you take?
Good question. It doesn't have to be as many as your pictures of the night sky, your lights. Your lights, you'll take, if you're doing untracked, you're going to take hundreds or even thousands. Calibration frames, you don't have to take that many. I'd say I shoot for 30 to 50, something like that. 50 is probably plenty for most of them. Sometimes people suggest doing more bias because they're so short, so might as well take 100 or something. But
yeah, something like that. Also, actually, for untracked astrophotography, darks are short, so you can take as many as you want, but you should make sure that no light is coming. Sometimes not only the you should of course cover the landscape. Also, you should cover the other end. What is it called in English?
The eyepiece.
The eyepiece,
the
viewfinder.
Viewfinder.
Yes,
Yeah, because light may come through viewfinder, so it is better if you cover it too while you are taking calibration frames. I think actually we finished. The last part was the post-processing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have, if you would like to say something to summarize all of it.
I could just show a few more photos and maybe something will come up.
Yeah.
You want to go to slide 6?
Sure.
So this was an early one I did. I think it's my most popular video. This is the results. It's just an untracked picture of the Orion constellation. You can get much better pictures untracked. I saw one recently from Gray Falls, who did this amazing Orion untracked, which has Barnard's Loop a lot more visible. But the point is that there's certain constellations where you shoot them at 85, like this one, or 135 millimeters, and there's so much going on in those constellations that they can be a good photo on their own. And you get the full constellation of Orion. You also see all of the individual deep sky objects within, like Horsehead and Flame and Orion Nebula, Witchhead, Barnard's Loop. So this is for us in the northern hemisphere, a winter constellation. A southern constellation that I think is just as interesting is Sagittarius. That's the core of the Milky Way, where I showed earlier, where you have Lagoon and Trifid and all these little jewels within a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So there you have, the Lagoon, the Trifid, Sagittarius star cloud, Omega, Eagle, so many different objects there. So I think that starting out, I would try these. If you're unsure what to shoot, I'd say in the summer shoot Milky Way, in the winter shoot Orion, and then after that, if you go to the next slide, you can maybe go in a little bit more. And this is Andromeda at 200 millimeters, and it becomes a little bit more challenging because you have to center it more. It's harder to find. You have to take shorter exposures and many more of them to get a good result. So extending the focal length makes it a little bit more challenging, but it can really make an interesting picture because you can get more detail on one object.
Yeah.
And then the last picture here, if you go to the next one, this is just to show that even with untracked, you can shoot reflection nebula, which are often thought of as being very dim objects, but there are some bright ones, like Pleiades. And I think Orion is partly a reflection nebula, but there's a few, and Rho Ophiuchi is another one. There's a few that are pretty bright that you could try untracked.
Yeah, and of course there are lots of actually open clusters, like for instance double cluster, beehive cluster, that they can go for, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I even like constellation shots, and so normally I don't suggest filters if shooting untracked. I would just suggest just the lens, no filter. The one filter though that maybe I would think about trying untracked is a diffusion filter for constellation shots. What a diffusion filter does is it bloats the stars, and so if you do a very wide angle shot, then you can see the constellation much clearer if you make the stars blow.
Yeah. Like I have seen pictures like Big Dipper, bloated stars from Big Dipper, and the other stars are normal, so it looks kind of cool.
Yeah, it looks kind of cool, and it's pretty easy to do. I think that it's easier if you just use the filter, if you can find one. You can do it in post-processing too a bit, but I think it's even easier just to use the filter, because then you just shoot some and the big stars will bloat, the little stars will still be pretty small.
Yeah, even with a little bit of dew, actually, you can do it.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't even need a filter for that. If there's a little bit dew, don't clean your lens. Then there you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
One other thing that just reminded me of is We've been talking all about what I call deep sky objects. So stars, star clusters, nebulae, galaxies are all deep sky objects. Of course, there's other sides to untracked astrophotography. Like you could shoot the moon untracked, but that's just not what we're talking about here. But just to bring that up, we're sort of talking about untracked and objects outside of our solar system, like other stars, nebulae, galaxies.
Yeah. That thanks for saying that. So we have one more question. Nico, do you use to keep the subs? In brackets, you may have a sponsorship with a hard drive company, ? Or prefer deleting hundreds of thousands of frames after stacking them?
So I'll show you how bad I am here. I have so many hard drives all over.
Yes, he has sponsorship.
External hard drives. I have dozens of these, terabytes and terabytes and terabytes, because I am a digital hack rat, you'd say. I can't delete anything. So I don't delete any videos. I don't delete any subs. I keep everything on hard drives. So it is a big expense, and it's also something that I'm a little bit scared of, where it's like I try to back up things in two places, but it's very challenging to keep on top of it.
I was gonna ask the backup solution that I also never delete any of my raw files or videos, and I keep a backup let's say I have a hard drive and I have 2 backups of each hard drive, so it's quite challenging.
That comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And
with a fortune, actually.
Yeah.
And I keep the hard drives in separate places.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's
even the bad ones, Nico. I mean, when you select the frames, and let's say there are some bad ones, there are trailed ones. You even keep those bad ones?
I honestly, I'm at the point where it takes more time to just think about deleting things and making these decisions. So yes, I probably keep everything.
Just like me.
but it's not a good habit necessarily. If I felt like I had more time, I would be more organized. But yeah.
Yeah, actually, recently I made my mind. I convinced myself to delete those.
Yeah.
And I'm recently deleting those because even the bad ones, it's not a good idea.
I can tell you there's been a few times where I've deleted something, I don't know why, and then years later I've been wanting it, and then I realize, I deleted it, and then that just kills me, because I when you want something, you want it.
Yeah.
I just never delete anything.
Yeah, and one bad habit of me is while processing in PixInsight, let's say I use a mask or something, and once I'm done, I just closed it, and sometimes I close some useful stuff also, and then I try to make the same mask, let's say, again and again. So it's not a good habit. Yeah. It's been 1.5 hours already. If you have questions, let's take them.
We have one more thing to mention, actually. So what would you recommend the ones who want to go further from untracked astrophotography? What should be their next step?
So I have a video coming out tomorrow, hopefully, that it will be on building your own tracker. And I made this video so that to try to keep the cost as low as possible. And so I built a tracker for $30 US, which is challenging, but it's doable. And so I won't give too much away, but it's called a barn door tracker. And basically, it's a very common type. You can see a picture of it there, where it's just 2 boards connected by a hinge on one end, and then you have a drive bolt. So basically, just a normal bolt that you manually move around to move the top board up. And if you can move it at the right rate, then you're tracking the stars. And so I'll have a video about this and how to make one and how to use it.
Yeah, of course, don't forget to follow, subscribe Nico's channel.
To Nico's channel, yeah.
And the channel info is in the description of the video of the live broadcast. So there are lots more to watch in Nico's channel. Yeah, this is also a very interesting one. Without any motor.
It's a good next step for people doing untracked because it's just adding one new piece of gear that you make yourself. You can add it between the tripod and the ball head, and then start going with it. And it offers some new opportunities. You can go deeper. You can take fewer subs, but get better results.
And it doesn't look like it's a very complex tracker, right? Like it's doable from at your office or yeah,
very simple. The only sort of tool that if you can't get the boards cut at the hardware store or something, you need a saw and then you need a drill, and those are the only tools you need.
Yeah.
And the good thing is it's not motorized, so you can do everything manually. And
batteries, nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
So what I would like to ask, maybe one of the final questions, is there a project or is there a goal, a ultimate goal in your mind that you would like to do someday?
Yeah. So there's a Finnish astrophotographer who's been getting a lot of attention this past week in the international news, named JP Metsavenio.
Yeah.
Who did a 10-year project,
12 actually.
12-year project in Milky Way, in narrowband. And that kind of thing, it really inspired me. I've been following him for many years. So I like things like that. Like I have a Cygnus mosaic that I've been expanding, but his work is sort of what inspires me. And I'd like to do really, really big mosaics like that. It just seems so interesting to me, and to have really long-term ideas like that one.
Yeah, actually, I also dream doing something like that, Nico. Really, I love those wide field stuff. Yeah. Do you guys have last questions?
Well, I guess we covered pretty much everything.
Then I also asked some last one. We would like to actually have some kind of collaboration project, Nico. So let's just think about it. The Stellar Experiences and you. We can do a video, or we can make a project, or let's just keep in touch. If you come up with something, we would love to hear. And of course, if you have an idea, we will tell you. But we would like to have a project together.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll get thinking about that.
Yeah.
A lot of times, it's like this. I recently collaborated with Astro Backyard, and it was just like this, where we said we should collaborate someday, and this was like a year ago. And then one day I was just like, out of nowhere, I had this idea to do the kit lens challenge, and so and did it.
That was a funny one, because I saw the trail, the teaser video of that, and you were sitting, and then your phone rings, and you look at the phone and say, "Oh, someone is Canada is calling," and that was a funny one. Yeah, so we should do something like that.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any questions, or if there are anything you want to say, Nico, as last words. Not last words, but last words of the broadcast, let's say.
No, I mean, I hope that I'll try to encourage other people I know to subscribe to your channel, because it's just your live streams have been really great, and someday I hope to get to Turkey to actually meet all of you and do astrophotography in person. That'll be so great when we can all do that together.
That would be amazing,
that's
actually.
that's very good, really. I mean, meeting people from other countries. Like you said, you went to Iceland. It was not planned to meet other astrophotographers, but 2 years ago I went to Finland, and it was a planned trip with other astrophotographers. So, changing ideas and, information, and having time together for something that you love, it's really valuable.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's hope that this pandemic ends soon and get together for this.
Yeah. Looking forward.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nico,
Yeah,
for joining.
we appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a really,
That's great.
it's been pleasure for us. Thank you.
Right, guys.
And thanks to all the viewers, and
Yeah.
make sure to check out Nico's social media, like we've wrote it on the description also,
And
or on
also
the comment, and also
Don't forget
our
us.
channels. So stay tuned, and thanks for joining, everyone.